And another thing, I'm sorry. You never notice how noisy traffic is.
You don't until you're talking.
Exactly. Mortar joints are very important in brick buildings. Bricks from the 20s and 30s, we talked about these wire brush bricks that were very textural, you want to touch them, they have a nice feel to them, that sort of that picturesque period revival. Well, the mortar joints are wider, and very often they'll have larger scale aggregate. You can actually see the little rocks. It's very textural. Older brickwork, if we can find some good examples, in the 19th century you have the reddish brick with a very thin, more often they would even decorate the joints. So there was a very different technique. And if you took one of those 19th century buildings and put this kind of a mortar in it, that would be very inappropriate. It would be very wrong for the building. It would give it an appearance it was never intended to have. So when we look at old buildings, we need to respect their character and what the craftsman intended, and try to be true to that as much as we can. This is another wonderful storefront from the 20s. Have got canters in. The door is not original to this period. This is a 1880s or 90s sort of an East Lake, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. It's designed to the door. It's also for a house, but you know, it's a door. Probably the original door was long since gone, which was probably a simple wooden door like we saw in that building down there, but a single leaf or one door instead of the two. See the pressed metal right there coming outside here? And I don't know if it's not on the inside, they probably took it off. But right there above the little entrance here is a nice pressed metal. Very nice, should be retained. Nice thin little transom. This is one of those examples in Oxford of a building that historically very likely did not have a balcony that has one. So that's something the commission will have to worry about. Certainly it's here, and it will stay here until they propose to do something about it, but it never had a balcony. And adding a balcony like this really obscures a lot of the detail in the brickwork. If you'll look up there where the top of the post is, you can see there was a little panel in the brick where it recessed back. It looks like it was a different color brick. I don't think that's just paint. I think it was a lighter color brick. So that was part of the decoration of the original building that's been obscured. But if a balcony is put on a building, it should be put on in such a way that when it is removed in the future, as much original fabric will be, as little original fabric will be lost as possible. It hopefully can be attached in such a way that when it comes off, the building is fine. That's one of the compromises we make sometimes. And another example of a very similar thing.
How are you doing on tape? I've got 37 minutes. Are you on long play? I'm gonna have to change the tape in a minute.
Is that okay?
You got a tape. I can.
Now you can see this is one of our Chickasaw because there's a little plaque back here behind the support for the balcony that they added, which mirrors the octagonal cast iron column, which is kind of interesting. But anyway, you can see it's a Chickasaw ironwork, and you see here this is probably some of the simplest fretwork we've seen, just in a series of loops, almost like figure eights one on top of the other. Much less elaborate than the ones across the way, but still same manufacturer. Again, catalogs, you get the columns, you want the fretwork, they put it on a train, and there you go. And this is broken up into the three sort of entrances that I suspect some of these probably had originally. Where you can see it here very easily, where the doors fold back, and behind this pilaster effect, and you actually can walk into the store from any one of three openings. Now I don't know that that's what was here originally, because none of this is original. We do have some clues. We have the cast iron threshold all the way across, and it may have been that way originally. But I would never encourage anybody to put it back that way unless you know that it was that way. So again, we don't want to create a false sense of history, which is something we struggle with all the time.
Can we take a quick break and let me change the tape of this thing?
That's fine.
You
I apologize.
mine.
We'll go a little over challenge, and sometimes there just aren't any.
Well, it's so all bits and pieces. The guy named Walter Coffey, the distant relative of mine, had a huge collection of those For what it's worth, the what's now Square Books, that balcony's been there a great while.
Yes.
Since the early 40s.
Yes. It was mentioned in the National Registry nomination of '78 as having had an original. So I don't know if in '78 it was there or not, but it was put back.
It was put back.
There was evidence that it was there.
Originally. there.
We're ready to
Okay,
go.
okay, good. Yeah, but if you can find an historic photograph, that's what you should always base a change on. Like I said, other than that, if you find good, strong physical evidence, and there's even an argument to be made for a building of a similar age and design that may have a missing element, then you can replicate that from the other building.
Can you clap your hands again for us? Oh, sorry.
And like we talked about earlier, I want you to look back and see the wonderful Italianate window hoods over the second floor there on the building there on the corner, and the very nice cornice at the top. And if you see that, and see how nice a proportion that is, with the cornice all at the top, all that elaborate work, the other buildings that don't have them, more than likely did. And probably should, because it's almost like a man in a nice suit without a top hat or something. It needs that finishing touch. And those hoods over the windows are very beautiful. They're probably pressed metal, I would guess. I don't know, maybe cast iron, it depends. It's hard to tell from here. But again, that was part of what was available. It was in the latest architectural style, and Italianate was a very big style. It was very popular in the 1870s and 80s. So you can see how nice an effect that is when it's preserved and kept as it should be. I'll come down to the corner across the street, and we can look back at Square Books and then really look at some other good intact storefronts right before we get to Nelson's. Well, the cornice work and all is very nice. It's an Italianate style again, which we talked earlier about how difficult it is to classify architectural styles, especially on vernacular buildings and even more so on commercial buildings, because they picked and chose and they got this out of a catalog and this is what the local builder was doing, and they just had this mesh of various influences. So Italianate, which we talked about that a little bit with the courthouse, using arches and a lot of elaborate detailing to sort of liven up and relieve the heavy, severe monumentality of the early Greek revival. And Italianate just seems to fit very well with most of our commercial buildings from the late 19th century. But sometimes it's to the point that you just have to say, okay, it's commercial minimalist, late 19th century commercial, or vernacular commercial. But this does have some nice Italianate effects with the very heavy medallions you see up there, the nice little effect with that band there, all of the elaborate things, all of which have names, and you forget them as soon as I try to say them. So, but again, that effect with the cornice work is what's missing on some of those buildings. And if you look back, there's a great storefront, the Jules Bayonet, that wonderful 1920s and 30s brickwork that is somewhat like on some of the buildings down here that's been obscured by the balcony. But they put a balcony on that building. You'd lose all of that. You wouldn't be able to see it. So that's what we're talking about. Because everybody knows Square Books because it's a great building. It's a great business. And a wonderful building with a great transom. And obviously the storefront's been altered with some metal. Probably replaced the glass, maybe gotten bigger pieces of glass. But this is an old alteration. It's been there probably since the 40s, I would guess, maybe 50s. Probably when they put the tile work in on the bulkhead, that was probably originally a wooden bulkhead. You can see the same kind of cast iron, Italianate sort of pilaster effect that we saw already. We'll see again without the rosettes. Doesn't look like it originally had them, but it may have had something. A wonderful arch here, nice Italianate effect. You see arches in the 1870s and 80s. Very often it's Italianate that we talked about. It's a very heavy arch. That's more Romanesque, which gets confusing because they all come from the same source. But look at the windows with the very nicely detailed window hoods and original 6/6 windows. And you can tell that those have been repaired. They're the original or very early windows. You see how the wooden part, the mutton, comes out and stands up from the glass? That's what you want to see. Just a very nice effect. And then at the very top, the wonderful cornice. I put that too hard on emphasis, but anyway, it's a great cornice. We'll see it better across the street. With the nice heavy modillion brackets on the corner and the smaller as we go through the bays right there. There's a lot to talk about here. We'll go walk across the street.